Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy, the first of my 3 streams today. I'm your host, Joe Firestone, and the topic for this stream is Lula Rises for the Truth. What I'd like to talk about today is Lula's condemnation of Israel for performing genocide in Gaza. I'm going to share a piece from Jacobin. Headline is Lula is right about Israel's genocide in Gaza. The author is Siraj Asi. And he starts off, Brazilian President Lula, that's a bit informal. Okay, Brazilian President Inácio, well, I guess I've got that wrong myself. Brazilian President Lula da Silva forcefully condemned Israel's brutal war on Gaza on Sunday before expelling Israel's ambassador to Brazil on Monday. These actions are part of his decades-long commitment to standing in solidarity with the Palestinian people. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, there's his full name, attends the ordinary session of the Assembly of the African Union at the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, on February 17th, 2024. And there is Lula, looking really comfortable in a spiffy blue suit with an appropriate tie. On Sunday, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva delivered a scathing condemnation of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Speaking at an African Union summit in Ethiopia, Lula accused Israel of committing a genocide that compares only to the Holocaust. Quote, what's happening in the Gaza Strip with the Palestinian people hasn't happened at any other moment in history. Actually, it has happened when Hitler decided to kill the Jews. Taking aim at Israel's brutal assaults on civilians in Gaza, Lula added, quote, it's not a war of soldiers against soldiers. It's a war between a highly prepared army and women, and children. Well, of course, I largely agree with Lula, about that. I have to add, though, there is some fighting with Hamas in that picture, as well. But there too, there's an asymmetry. There's a well-prepared modern army which is facing a well-prepared resistance army, or guerrilla army of perhaps 30,000 highly motivated people. I think the civilians are definitely being targeted by the Israelis, but they're certainly caught, in that situation. I don't think there's much success Israel is having against the informal army, shall we say, or the resistance army, but it is having great success in its genocide against the Palestinians. But Israel predictably dismissed Lula's remarks as anti-Semitic. Of course, that's just a smear. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described Lula's Holocaust parallel as, quote, disgraceful and grave, unquote, while Foreign Minister Israel Katz announced that Lula is, quote, a persona non grata in Israel till he takes back his comments. But Lula refused to bow down. On Monday, Brazil recalled its Israeli ambassador for Tel Aviv and, quote, summoned, unquote, the ambassador to a meeting. I'll play this video.
It was this comment from Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, known by many simply as Lula, that started things off.
What is happening in the Gaza Strip with the Palestinian people has no parallel in other historical moments. In fact, it did exist when Hitler decided to kill the Jews.
Comparing Israel's mass killing of Palestinians in Gaza to the Holocaust drew an immediate reaction from Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu.
President Silva has disgraced the memory of 6 million Jews murdered by the Nazis, and he's demonized the Jewish state like the most virulent anti-Semite. He should be ashamed of himself.
And on Monday, Israel's foreign minister summoned Brazil's ambassador to the country's Holocaust memorial for a public, pointed dressing down, culminating in this.
And we, as I asked to convey to President Lula, will not forget nor forgive, and I declare him, in my name and the name of the citizens of Israel, as persona non grata in Israel, as long as he does not apologize and take it back.
But President Lula is not backing down. He recalled Brazil's ambassador to Israel for consultations and summoned the Israeli ambassador to Brazil for an explanation as this diplomatic dispute continues. John Holman, Al Jazeera.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.
Okay, I must add to
Brazil's ambassador for a public, pointed dressing down.
I must add to that since there is a public diplomatic dispute between Brazil and Israel right now, that qualifies Brazil to do its own filings before the International Court of Justice. Just an interesting counterpoint here. The tragic irony is that Lula's statement only confirms what Israeli politicians have been saying out loud over the past 4 months, and whose genocidal statements were cited as damning evidence at the International Court of Justice genocide hearing last month. Excuse me, Israeli officials and top generals themselves have openly called for genocide in Gaza, pledging to turn the besieged Strip into Auschwitz and Dresden, and even celebrating such atrocities. In October last year, a former member and deputy speaker of the Knesset demanded, quote, there is one and only one solution, which is to completely destroy Gaza before invading it. I mean, destruction, like it was in Dresden and Hiroshima, without a nuclear weapon. In November, Israeli Minister of Economy Nir Barkat said, quote, I don't remember Britain or the United States at the tail end of the Second World War bombing Dresden, thinking about the residents, unquote. But I have to remind here the Israeli Minister of Economy, Nir Barkat, that at the tail end of the Second World War, there was no genocide convention. This was before the Genocide Convention of 1948, before the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel, and before that same State of Israel signed the Genocide Convention of 1948, obligating it not to commit to genocide against any other people. In December, going on with the article, in December, an Israeli official demanded that Gaza should be, quote, flattened completely, just like Auschwitz today, unquote. This is not the first time Lula has condemned Israel's war crimes in Gaza. Last October, barely weeks into the Gaza genocide, Lula became one of the first world leaders to demand a ceasefire in Gaza, saying that, quote, innocent people of Gaza must not pay the price for the insanity of those who want war, unquote. In November, after Israel besieged Gaza's largest hospital, Lula declared that, quote, Israel's attitude towards children, towards women, is the equivalent to terrorism. There's no other way to put it, unquote. He added, quote, if I know a place is full of children, even if there's a monster inside, I can't kill the children just because I want to kill the monster. Amid heavy Israeli airstrikes on Gaza that month, Brazil became among the first countries to receive Palestinian refugees from Gaza. Welcoming the rescued refugees at the Brasilia air base in the capital, Lula accused Israel of killing innocent people without any criteria, unquote, which he described as, quote, brutal and inhumane violence against innocent people, unquote. As a leader of the global South, the Lula government led the way in Latin America in holding Israel accountable for its war crimes in Gaza. In January this year, Brazil backed South Africa's ICJ genocide case against Israel, which later ruled on, quote, plausible genocide, unquote, in Gaza. An official statement highlighted Lula's role in the decision. Quote, the president expressed his support for South Africa's initiative to bring Israel before the ICJ to determine that Israel immediately ceases all acts and measures that may constitute genocide or related crimes under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, unquote. Lula's remarks over the weekend are the culmination of his long-standing support for Palestine. In March of 2010, Lula made a historic visit to Israel and Palestine. Speaking at the Knesset, he reminded Israeli leaders that illegal Jewish settlements in the West Bank and Jerusalem were killing peace prospects in Palestine. Lula refused to visit the grave of Theodor Herzl, the father of modern political Zionism, in Israel. Instead, he visited Ramallah, where he laid a wreath on the tomb of the late Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat. In a passionate speech, he called for the creation of an independent Palestinian state. Honey, that's the door, please. In December that year, the Lula government announced the recognition of the Palestinian state. He donated land in Brasilia for the construction of a Palestinian embassy. It's right in there. And opened a representative office in Ramallah. In a gesture of solidarity, Lula signed 5 bilateral agreements with the Palestinian government covering agriculture, education, sports, health, and tourism sectors. Brazil's recognition of Palestine led to a ripple effect in the region, as neighbors, Argentina, Bolivia, and Ecuador, joined Brazil in recognizing the Palestinian state that year, with Chile, Peru, Uruguay, and others following suit a year later. Lula also carried the Palestinian cause to international forums. His UN speeches are replete with passionate defenses of Palestine as a, quote, free and sovereign national state, unquote, and seething condemnations of, quote, Israel's crimes and violations against Palestinians, unquote. In one memorable speech in April last year during an official visit to Spain, Lula lamented that while the UN created Israel in 1948, thanks to the partition plan, quote, in 2023, it fails to create a Palestinian state, unquote. Speaking in Cairo last week, Lula reiterated his commitment to the creation of a sovereign Palestinian state. Lula's support for the Palestinian cause goes back decades. As a union leader in the 1980s during the military dictatorship in Brazil, Lula viewed the question of Palestine as a fight between the oppressed and the oppressors. He maintained formal relations with the Palestinian Liberation Organization through his Workers' Party, PT, and cultivated a personal relationship with Arafat. This marked the beginning of a strong and long-standing legacy of solidarity with the Palestinian cause in Brazil, encompassing Brazilian parties, trade unions, and popular movements that firmly support the cause of Palestinian liberation. This week, Brazil will have a chance to present its cause before the International Court of Justice, as the court is set for the first time to review the legal consequences of Israel's decades-long occupation, apartheid, and oppression of the Palestinian people, where countries are preparing to present their arguments and highlight Israel's violations of Palestinian rights, including war crimes and crimes against humanity. Lula's moral clarity on Gaza comes amid shameful Western complicity, not to mention Arab complicity in Israel's genocide and war crimes in Gaza. Lula spoke as the Biden administration was preparing to send a new weapon shipment to Israel, while threatening to veto a new ceasefire resolution in the UN, which, by the way, it did veto. As the next sentence says, the United States has now made good on that threat. Just last week, a day after the Rafah massacres, the U.S. Senate approved a lavish multi-billion-dollar package in military aid for Israel. Excuse me. John Kirby, White House National Security spokesman, vowed that, quote, we're going to continue to support Israel despite Rafah, unquote. Speaking on the White House lawn, President Joe Biden referred to the Rafah massacres as, quote, our military operation in Rafah, unquote. For those who have witnessed the Biden administration's complicity in Israel's genocide in Gaza over the past 4 months, his blunder sounded like more than a slip of the tongue. Lula was clearly aiming at the United States when he declared last week, quote, the right to veto must end, and the members of the UN Security Council must be pacifist players and not actors who foment war, unquote. The death toll in Gaza is nearing 30,000 civilians, half of them children, with nearly 2 million others displaced. As Israel gears up for its ground invasion of Rafah, where some 1.5 million displaced Palestinians are taking shelter, threatening a new round of genocide and ethnic cleansing, Lula's words serve as a forewarning to the horrors to come, as Evo Morales, the former president of Bolivia, wrote in solidarity with Lula on Monday, quote, to be declared persona non grata by a genocidal government that massacres children is a privilege, that reaffirms commitment to life and peace before the international community and the people of the world, unquote. So, when keeping this article in mind and listening to what it says and reading it, one has to remember that Lula is one of the most important leaders, if not the most important leader of the global South. He is the president, of a nation of something like 220 million people in population. It is a nation 2/3 the size of the United States. In area, it is roughly the same size, as the United States. It may even be a little larger. I forget my area statistics. Brazil is huge. It is growing each year, in importance. It will be greatly spurred through its membership in BRICS and its leadership inside, of BRICS. It will once more be becoming prosperous under Lula as he tries to improve the lot of the poor, and the middle class in Brazil. It is work he started through his first 2 terms. He will continue it now. And he will accomplish, I believe, even more than he accomplished earlier, in spite of severe opposition from the right wing, in Brazil. His forthright condemnation of genocide is exactly what we need at this time, when the denials of genocide keep on happening and when the United States is clearly complicit, in genocide. I don't know if I shared this video to Facebook. I probably did not. As late as it is in the video, I do need to do that now. If you'll excuse me for a moment. That increases my audience, on Facebook. Now I will turn to see if there are any comments. There are some folks here. Thank you for coming. I don't know who you are. I don't see any comments, but I am glad you're here. If you have any questions or comments, now is the time. I will answer them as best I can. If not, I will tell you now that I have 2 more videos coming today. They will most probably be at 8, and 8:30, though there is a possibility that I will schedule one for 7:30 and one for 8:30, space them, a little more. Those topics will be taking the banks away from the bankers. And that, of course, is a dump the corruption video. and Diffusing the Derivatives Time Bomb. That is also a Dump the Corruption video. So I will see you then. And thank you for coming to this one. And I will say goodbye now.